she previously worked here at MTA before. I did as well. I never knew her then, but I came to know her as the executive director of MTA Transit.
Over there.
And I found her very, very, very responsive to commuting issues. And I think that we accomplished quite a bit over there, given the circumstances under which she was working and the people in the state of New Jersey have been subjected to over the past few years. She was special counsel here and executive vice president and general counsel at the MTA Capital Construction Company, and provided senior management policy and legal advice on mega projects such as the Second Avenue subway and East Side Access and the 7th train extension. And she has a BA in political science from the University of Rochester, and a doctorate degree from Queen's University School of Law. So I will turn the meeting over to you.
It doesn't say that on the website.
No.
If you guys want to put it up, we'll use it next time.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to join your meeting today. I started a few days before the New Year's Eve celebration, so right at the end of last year, and since then spent quite a bit of time traveling the system, going to different locations and different facilities in order to hear a different voice. It's easy to sit in a meeting of your senior staff. That's an important voice, and it's an important voice to hear. But there's another voice that needs to be heard too, and more of that is around our frontline employees as well. And so for me, it's been a very beneficial few months of meeting different people and hearing different concerns that they have. And perhaps I'll start there. I'll start with our employees. When I started, we had the very harsh snowstorm on January 23rd. I thought we did a remarkable job of both in the area of the subway system. We went to shutter the above ground elements of the system and brought the buses back, coincident with city streets coming back the next day. I thought we did a very effective job about communicating to our customers and to our employees during that storm weekend, and then the aftermath immediately thereafter, so that Monday morning looked and felt pretty good. On the other hand, that we're demanding a lot of our employees, and I'm mindful of that. I think there's a real opportunity here at Transit to improve the culture around an appreciation of diversity, around an appreciation of inclusion, around communication, using technology to communicate more with our employees. I've in the recent few months have been trying to use our available MTA Today resources more aggressively to communicate to our employees, not just about things that Ronnie's involved in, but about things that they're reading about in the paper. I communicated personally to the folks that supported a series of community meetings around the L project. And you've heard a lot about the Canarsie Tunnel. Well, every time we went into one of these community meetings, Ronnie and Tom went, but so did 30 other people. Why did they go? They were people from operations planning, they were people from CPM, they were folks from government and community relations, so that they brought their subject matter expertise to the table, literally. And I thought that the people who came to those meetings appreciated the information that Tom and I were there to deliver, but they really appreciated talking to people one-on-one in the quiet times before and after the formal part of the meetings. And I think that shows a whole nother face of who New York City Transit can be and should be. I have what's called the top 150, the top 150 managers of New York City Transit. And when I started, I didn't realize we had characterized them as the top 150. They're actually the top 165. And I said I'd like to figure out a way to communicate really quickly with those folks And they said, well, we could put a meeting together. We use the boardroom to do that, and it could give you an opportunity to meet people as well as to just communicate around you as the new president of New York City Transit. And so we did that. I said, well, that's great. I'd like to do that every quarter. They're like, what? You know, I said, yeah, we're going to do that every quarter. We have another meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow's meeting is less about Ronnie talking and a lot more about Michael Collins and Joel Andrews talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And they have an entire workshop put together so as to promote discussion and, frankly, some training around how to manage a diverse workforce. And so a lot of our issues that sound like they're EEO claims, they're not EEO claims, they're bad management claims. And so we need to give people tools in order to promote good management, good supervision. So that's an example of what I hope to be the beginnings of culture change. Communicating with employees, bringing your top 150 together, and actually giving them substantive information to go back into their home departments to talk about. That's around some of the culture change that my observations have led me to say, hey, we really need to focus on our people and what tools we're giving our people to be able to have a healthy organization. You know, there was a time, having started in 1987, there was a time when you could throw money at problems. Well, those times are not these times. And so it takes creativity around management in times like this. And there's a lot that we offer here at Transit that people just don't know about or they've forgotten about. Whether it's around tuition reimbursement. We have an incredible training portfolio. We were just talking with some employees upstairs about better promoting our training schedule. These are things that are available to people if they have an interest and they can take advantage of. So, you know, around the large bucket that is how important our people are and how are we helping them to be a good, vital part of New York City Transit. I think there's room for improvement. I'm very keenly aware of it, and I'm trying to move that agenda forward. Recently, the capital program was approved. You know, when Tom first started talking to me about this position last year, he said, "Oh, it's going to be great. You're going to start. The program's going to be approved. You know, you'll be go." Well, it was what? It's not done. And, you know, many trips to Albany later, and many meetings with elected officials later. You know, I'm pleased that it is done. It's vitally important for us. What does it mean for New York City Transit? You know, it's $15.8 billion. $15.8 billion. And if you take off the buses and the buying subway cars from that, that's $11.6 billion of construction work and reinvestment in our infrastructure. I think that's an important thing that we have to talk more about to our customers, frankly to the region and taxpayers in New York. I don't think they know what we're doing enough. So I think we've done a really good job at organizing ourselves around service disruptions and, you know, construction-related disruptions. But I don't think we've communicated effectively about the why. What's the next sentence when I'm telling you what's happening this weekend? We've forgotten to tell people why we're doing it. And I know a lot of it is invisible. People don't really understand when we talk about modernizing a signal system what that actually entails. And I'm not suggesting that we need to create a wild education campaign around it, but I think there should be a reasonable connection between we're modernizing your signal system, that means we're going to put more trains per hour through it, and by the way, that's good for you. I think there can be more communication around that. Andrew, you and I talked recently about the posters of shame, right? You get to the wall, and it's this massive communication around service disruptions. I was standing at Astor Place last night, and I was looking at the wall, and I was thinking about our conversation, and your eyes glaze over. Yes. It's so much. And a lot of it is,
It doesn't emphasize the line you're entering
Right.
in any way.
it's unrelated to where I am or where I'm going.
That was an
And
improvement.
often it's at the base of a stairs, so you can't sit there in your wheelchair without being trampled.
That's an improvement.
Chambers Street,
Right, the location.
123.
Ronnie,
It's all
you
relevant.
may, I don't know if this is the time, but, or Nancy mentioned it, you may want to, sometimes you've got to go back to the future. And when we were here, when I was here with Dick Ravitch, we started something called then it was called the Rider Information Center, now it was the Customer Information Center. And it was one place with a lot of room to post notices, maps, everything. And even though we just put in Grand Central, which by the way wasn't working today, the new things where you can bring up a map, you can bring, we can talk about that later.
Right.
It cost me a half hour, playing a half hour. But we can talk about this later, but they actually worked as far as having one central place and some place that people could actually see all of this instead of having millions of pieces of paper all over the place. So we can talk about it. But I didn't know if he had mentioned it to you when you had this conversation.
No, I
I'll be
appreciate
happy to talk to you about it at length later.
Yeah, sure,
It's my
no.
baby.
Okay. We should do that.
Yeah.
We should do that. The, you know, the ability to effectively communicate to our customers is another thing that I think across the MTA, Tom is sort of challenging us around technology. And so we had an interesting meeting where Tom had the agency heads there and some of his senior staff around the table, and we were talking about social media, and we were talking about our use of social media, and every agency is like, well, this is what we do, and that's what we do, and we're all good. And Tom gets to me, I'm like, we're all too old to be really having this conversation in a meaningful way. And I had the inside baseball advantage. My daughter works for Twitter. And so before the meeting, I had a long conversation with her about what resources Twitter has available to things like the MTA. And there are resources available. We just haven't availed ourselves of them. And think about it. We're going through this whole effort of putting Wi-Fi in all of our underground stations. What are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with it, right? We know what our customers might want to do with it, but what are we going to do with it, and how do we make that a more proactive and better way to communicate with people in real time? Because that's the other problem. Our customers have real-time access amongst themselves, right? They're tweeting amongst themselves about what they're perceiving to be a service disruption. And we are delayed. We come to that dance a little late in the game. So one of the things that I've said to the RCC, and we have a really good thing here at Transit. We actually have people who are communications specialists in the RCC. Some properties don't do it that way. Some properties rely on their subject matter rail experts to put out the communication piece. And then all you end up is with rail speak. You don't end up with actual people speak. So we have good people who know how to do this. They have to do it faster. We have to give them different standards. You know, saying 15 minutes to get a message out
Too late.
is too late.
It's embarrassing. I've
It's-
said this to Paul. I said, you know, it's embarrassing. You get a message. The delays are over.
Right.
Oh, you mean a text message?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I get the emails. I just
An alert or
I'm embarrassed.
or if you follow us on Twitter, you'll get the message. But we
But
have to bring that time frame down to much more real time.
Well, we can
I
run a
do
2-minute headway.
is
Yeah.
I'm checking the elevator from the train. I am at West 4 checking to see if this elevator is working. I will get off the train, on the platform, and check the elevators.
Right.
That is expensive.
Right.
There not only has to be the what and the time, but people want to know why. This morning, I'll say it again, it just happened now. There's these new things that are put in instead of the time clocks, it's just in Grand Central, where you can bring up a map.
The on the goes, yeah.
The on-the-go thing. Well, great. So there were getting off the number 6 to transfer to the number 405 to get down here. And the thing is there, push the button, and there were already people waiting 14 minutes for the next number 4 or 5. People were starting to literally, and somebody recognized me and said, oh, she knows. I said, I don't. And then
And there was no
And they said
message on the go.
nothing on the go about service changes.
Right.
The only thing that was there were the service changes that are coming up this weekend, which is, so now you can see electronically.
So it was working.
Well, if you want to call that, it was
Yes,
functioning.
Yes.
It was functioning, it was not working the way it should.
Well,
And then,
the on-the-go does not give you real time, it's giving you scheduled information.
no, there is another button to
There is
press
a-
that
they
says,
can have
there
the
are three
feature.
different things.
Right.
Most people don't know how to.
Those
find that.
big, no, those, I'm talking about the big things that were upstairs. Okay, and all I'm saying is there is a button that you can push that says service disruptions, or
Right.
service changes or something, and there was nothing. So the 14 minutes got people angrier and more frustrated because there should be
Right.
and it turned out it was a 17-minute headway, which there had to be a reason for a 17-minute headway at around 11:30, which I'd love to know why it was.
I don't care why.
I was checking to see if I had gotten any good information that I could share with you.
It was a 13-minute when I
Judy,
was
we were at
waiting.
the Grand Central line waiting for southbound express on track 2. We just missed one at 11:32. We had to wait 6 minutes for the next one. And I called Ellen and told her.
Well, no, then I missed that one then, because there was another problem with the number 6 I wanted to get into.
But number 6 were running like
Number
crazy.
6 showed up, 8 number 6 showed up
But
in a row while.
similar,
No, but the
All right.
machine said 14.
I'm
Similar
sorry,
issue
Jay,
came up.
Your-
similar issue came up at a past TRC meeting where there was a transit disruption. But the issue of how that's communicated to the surface division. So if you're looking at communication, one of the
Right.
suggestions that came out of that is, you mentioned the rail control center, but now as they're contemplating the construction of the new bus command center, it's how they relate to one another. Because if, people need to know the options, if they're gonna, am I gonna wait that 17 minutes or can I catch the number 2
Yeah, go get it.
and the bus and go where I'm going? So it's how the two work together as one system. So if you're looking at it,
Yeah,
that may
no, one of the things that was unfortunate is we missed a window when we were building the rail control center to create a co-located command center. And now we have to patchwork it, we have to somehow create a virtual co-location, if you know what I mean. Because that's the very issue, is how to actually understand what both sides of the house are doing and what options we can then deliver to our customers.
I'm glad to hear that
Yeah.
you're looking at that, yeah.
It's one of the things that I was also concerned about in terms of even something as important as emergency management, where seconds really do count, and how to create a technology bridge between the command centers.
And that came up at the meeting with the bus control center, and
Mm-hmm.
they are building that into the plan.
Right,
So-
one of the things that we're doing is having a tabletop, our Department of Security is organizing it for us around a biological, an attack. And while we're doing it in the context of an attack in the subway system, one of the interesting outcomes of that is gonna be this issue of how are we communicating information between modes, and even between departments. So our model has the senior leadership team in a war room at the Rail Control Center. There's a critical component of that team that is not going to be there, and that's the team that's at Jamaica Avenue, right? And so we have to use technology to bridge that for the time being.
On this side, we're the commuter rail.
Oh.
These
You don't
guys,
look like commuter rail.
no ties, we're tired, we're very much commuter rails.
But you got some.
One of the issues, one of the issues is if you're buying a train ticket from Hicksville, you're coming in with your family for a day of the weekend, and you want to buy a ticket for your family, your kids or your family, and you want 4 rides on the subway at the same time, you can't do that, you can only get one round trip. As Is there a way to kind of try to coordinate so that people don't have to first come into, and that's try to buy,
And then
get
hit the
another
vending
line,
machine.
get another line?
Right.
Because there are no,
Heck,
there are
the
no
vending
machines to buy them out
Right.
of Long Island. And you now have a line you waited on to buy your ticket out of Long Island, then you have to run another line you have to wait on now to get to the best station. It discourages people from running as groups
Yeah.
and doing multiple, let's say, come in for the whole weekend. I want to do something, is there a way to try to coordinate so you can buy with your
On the
railroad ticket, buy
yeah.
more than just
Right.
round trip, subway round trip.
The technology answer should be yes,
Yeah.
but I don't know the answer to that, so I'll look into that. Yeah.
Probably a big change in the shoe.
No. You want to use your monthly.
Well, if someone's buying, let's say, you could bring someone to buy a ticket, round trip Long Island Railroad.
Oh, just a Long Island Railroad ticket.
And you want to get 4 subway rides on that, with on the back or with it.
Yeah, you
Can't.
can.
You can only
Right,
get
you only
one round
get
trip.
you can only get 2 individual subway rides.
On that ticket, on a
Right.
Long
On
Island
that
Railroad
ticket.
ticket.
But they want-
Because
they
it
want-
doesn't have,
You can't get it unlimited for the day, a daily.
Right.
Or buy
No.
5, 6,
Anything
tickets.
else.
You could buy other Long Island Railroad.
You could buy individual
buy individual.
tickets.
but you
They
want
have
to
but big money-
$20 tickets, which is, you buy the Long Island Railroad too.
I'm saying it's more subway rides.
You want to put the subway ride on the same,
rides.
on the same.
You
Right.
can buy it,
The
you
Metro
can buy a
card.
Metro
I'm
card
saying the same ticket.
from the Long Island Railroad.
I,
Gee, that sounds like a freedom ticket you're talking about. No, it's pricey.
No,
that's not.
I've
Just
got one
paying
of the,
for it, just paying for it in one shot.
I've got one other technology request. There should be a way that you can check your balance of your Metro card online. And that's something that everybody always says is like, I don't know, I've got 2 Metro cards here on my phone right now. Are they good? You know, what's on? I don't know.
This complaint goes
I
back to
know.
before they introduced it.
I know,
Mhm.
but there just should be a way to check your balance. There is online.
There'll even be a way to refill your card once you've got a smartphone.
Well, no, you can do that now with,
Yeah.
with the express.
Oh, yeah, with that.
Yeah, you don't have to go and actually.
Going back to Howard Roberts, he actually had a kitchen cabinet for disability. And it was interesting because he rode with many of us. And he got a very different perspective. We would extend the same
Sure.
to you. I think it's really important
Yeah.
because it's a whole different
It is,
way of looking at
it is, absolutely.
what we are and aren't offering.
Excuse me, thank you. Yes, agreed.
Adding what Ms. Prentice is saying, a little concerned that, you know, if we lately been seeing, before you became on, you've been seeing a lot of outages on elevators. And yes, there being building stations, like right now, the Second Avenue's gonna have elevators, thank God. But there are some stations I know could be built outside, I'm talking more of the outside stations. Some stations, like the Brighton line or some on the CB, could be built as a little more accessibility, like a ramp or maybe an elevator. But a lot of the people who want to travel on the trains have to go onto a bus, to a subway, and it's a little more challenging, a little bit. Especially, you know, I was at the L train in Brooklyn, which I have to say was well controlled and well done, and they really got the press to bite on their tongues and say,
Which
"Ooh,
one did you go to?
Williamsburg,
Williamsburg.
not the Canarsie one.
Okay.
I couldn't be at the TRC and
Oh, okay.
that. I was at the very first one, and I was really glad to see the evidence on the table. To me, and I said to Tom right in front of him, I said, that was a brilliant chess move. And he laughed because he knows I meant chess or checkers is a good move. It got the press acting, you know, looking like, oops, we made a mistake. And you're seeing people starting to walk out, they're saying, oops, the MTA is telling the truth. And the press are going, uh-oh, we made a mistake.
It was really interesting to me. In preparing just around the L Tunnel project, I didn't realize that the first thing we had to do was convince people that the work actually needed to be done. I mean, that first article that came out saying, you know, well, why they're not saying the truth about it was such a wow moment for me, and it really did change the orientation of how we went out into the communities about that.
Just to add with the L train, and I'll be quick, and I agree with Ms. Prentice. I'm glad you are working on the B39 bus, making it maybe SBS or making it longer buses, but we need need to get that bus to end somewhere near to a near accessible train station, because you know, the next nearest accessible station on the J is really Fulton Street, or the M is Broadway Lafayette, and it's gonna be a challenge now where you're gonna turn around that bus. And if it's gonna be turning around, maybe you should turn around near Broadway Lafayette, which does have an elevator, I'm just guessing right now, to make it more accessibility friendly, and it will get the person to get to where they have to go. Since the M is gonna be representing more the L, which I like the idea of what it's gonna be. Hope it ends at 96 seconds, because that would be easier for me, a bonus train. Or go to 145th, which is supposed to go near you, Edith. Close, but no cigar.
Far from it. And 145th is an accessible station.
I said close, I didn't
Yeah.
say permanent.
Yeah.
But I like the ideas of it. In the past, there were no like ideas, it was just shine in. It's a good idea that you're hearing us and communicating with us. But the priority right now is more, Jeff, is accessibility, because the L line does have a lot of accessibility. Myrtle Wyckoff is gonna be the most deadliest, heaviest station with the elevators. And if that elevator goes out, that's it, you're dead.
I think we have a lot to do around elevator, and I'll add, elevator maintenance. One
They
of the-
really have to also accelerate. Come on, this is ridiculous. 8 months, a subway elevator is out
Which one is that?
to replace the elevator.
Oh, replacing the elevator.
Yeah, I mean,
They are big projects, but
they are big projects, but they're not 8 months.
one of the things that we've done is refocus within the Department of Subways and the chief of elevator and escalator maintenance, because he had divided responsibilities. So he's now refocused exclusively on elevators and escalators. I am a little concerned, to be frank, that Second Avenue Subway, you mentioned it, comes replete with new escalators, elevators and escalators, a number of which we've never maintained before. You know, the inclinator at the number 7 concerns me, as, recognizing that that's a new challenge for us to have the right resources available. We've been talking to the unions, that's part of the problem, is because our unions claim that work. And so we've been talking to the unions about creating perhaps a different model, recognizing there's enough work for everybody. I keep saying this to my friends at the TWU. There's work for everybody. But maybe once you do one, you get called for the first repair, and then it looks like it's going to be more complicated than what you currently can do, then we're free to call a third-party contractor to come in to do heavier duty.
My brother was one of the techs doing that on one of the subcontractors. And it was really interesting to know that the people who developed that and put that together are not the ones who are any way, shape. They are so far from any chance of working on those after spending years doing them.
Right.
It's a little frightening.
Okay, but I want to give other people an opportunity to speak. On those elevators, I saw them running very, very successfully in several places in Europe last summer, and there were no problems.
Right.
So,
Right.
Andrew?
We had a little discussion before you arrived, Bonnie, about the anticipated headways on Phase 1 of Second Avenue. Whether you think a 6-minute or an 8-minute headway is sufficient, we found it just odd that it wasn't the same headway in both directions. Wouldn't you need that to keep the trains in equal
Balancing
at
the
both ends of the
service.
line?
I'm going to say a couple of things around the headway discussion that started. Was it a TA committee that we started that conversation?
And then you had a public hearing on it.
Was it at the public hearing?
Yeah, I know I brought that up.
Okay, so a couple of things. I mean, one is obviously the planners have done all of the modeling that they are educated to do. And I do think, let me give a quick nod to our planning group. I think Peter Caffiero is probably the smartest ops planner in the country. And I've worked with some really good ones. Having said that, we are vitally constrained by what? By subway cars. I can't tell you how many problems I have because our subway cars are not on the property when we thought they would be. And so that is, if somebody had to say to me, what is the one thing that can make the fastest difference? It would be getting subway cars on the property in a timely
New
way.
ones?
Well,
New
179.
ones.
Okay.
New ones.
You're on 179.
They're delayed. They are. They're delayed. And I'm having these very difficult conversations with Bombardier, and Tom has too. I mean, this is like dial 911 time, folks, in terms of problems. And so the 8-minute headway discussion that was had, I think somebody said, and we don't have the cars, but it was like the sotto voce version of, and we don't have the cars.
There's that issue, but there's the issue of uneven in the direction,
Yeah.
is what I'm getting at. It's like a train, like a roach motel, you know, trains go in, but they don't come out.
But they do feel that that's going to be, that is a directional ridership.
But.
Perhaps just to start.
But the other side of the coin is you need those trains on the Bright Line in Brooklyn for the northbound track in as well.
Right, that's true, absolutely.
Could the late delivery of the cars hold up the opening, the December opening of the subway? That would have no impact on it?
No, we're prepared to open, and we have the cars to run the opening day service.
But the day after.
And every day thereafter.
How
On the second day, you realize what happens when you run 6 minutes in one direction, 8 in the other.
Eventually those hours catch up.
I mean, the amazing thing is that we had a fleet management plan. That plan had subway cars coming on a particular schedule. When that schedule got bust, I don't think that we looked hard enough at what the impacts were going to be across the system. And so, you know, we talked about the Canarsie project, and one of the mitigations to that, it has us putting full-length cars on the G, for example. You know, everything comes at the expense of some other things. I mean, the impacts on the L give us some flexibility because we will have other trains to be able to put elsewhere. What happens though when we're done? We need to get those cars on the property.
When is the first car supposed to be delivered?
The-
In fact, any even constructed?
The prototype is supposed to come July, I think, the first prototype. This summer, right. I think that's 18 months late,
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah,
This is typical of all train. Toronto is having a time getting in because the flexibility's out of them also.
Out of Bombardier, right.
This might have been.
Montreal actually is reissuing its tender for cars because Bombardier was the lowest.
Right.
Right.
This is a case where possibly taking the runner-up bid might have saved money in the long run over keeping the 32s.
But, you know, in fairness, Bombardier is a good car builder. How they went from being a good car builder to we can't figure out how to weld, and you know they had casting problems, they had welding problems. I mean,
Everybody's car is different.
this is car 101 stuff
Every
though.
car is different.
Right.
Warren?
When are the 211s scheduled to arrive, the first of those? We don't know that yet, right?
We haven't issued the